Hoo-yah!
Howdy there, nerds. Today I'm going to talk about whether you should go to college or not to become a computer scientist, a programmer, data scientist, whatever role you're really excited about. And the answer is not as simple as a yes or a no. College debt, as we all know, has gotten just completely out of control. I graduated college many years ago, and I had almost $100,000 in college debt, and it took me a very long time to get that in a place where I'm starting to feel very comfortable with it. I've worked really hard to pay it off, and luckily, for my wife, we've been able to pay a lot of her college along the way due to the career that I've built up. So college debt is something that you seriously need to think about. So I always say a couple things. First off, are you sure that you love programming? Because I've actually taught students, I've actually hired people, I've met people, I've talked to people that got into programming because they thought it could pay well, but they ultimately didn't love it. And trust me, you're going to need to love programming, and you're going to need to love technology to be successful, because it takes a lot to keep up with everything. Things change on a daily basis. You need to constantly be growing as a person and as a programmer. So, how do you find out if you love computer programming? I'd say do it. You guys are in such a great place right now. The internet has so many opportunities for you to explore programming for very little money. I didn't have that when I went to school. There was no Code Academy. I was reading books. I was trying to write code on my TI Basic calculator when I was young, using the manual to learn how to do it. But I still knew I loved programming because I went back to it, and the magic of bringing something alive on the screen is what got me the most excited. So I would say the first step that you have, determine if you are 100% sure that you want to be a programmer. So the second thing is, you also need to understand the reality of programming. In this awesome world that we live in, we get to create things and make things and bring things to life that wouldn't ultimately have existed before, and that's pretty cool. But when you're working as a programmer, whether it's at a large company or a small company, there's a wide varying amount of degree of input that you get to put into a project. A lot of developers start off wanting to be a game developer. Game developer is a very, very hard job, and I personally did that for 7 years. 7 years I was in the game industry working on games for the Xbox 360, the PlayStation 3, the Vita, the Wii, and so on. And what you find is that while you can be creative to a certain degree, the people with the money ultimately make the final decisions, which is understandable. So what you may find yourself doing is just doing someone else's dream, someone else's idea, and you need to be okay with that and still love what you're doing. You need to love programming and technology so much that if someone tells you to do something that you may not agree with or you think you can do better, that after voicing your concerns about that, you still have to sit down and code that the way that they want. And that's sometimes not easy. I mean, it was hard on me to actually do that. I will say, personally, after 7 years in the video game industry, moving over to starting a business where we focused on business applications, mobile apps, that allowed me to be a lot more creative because now I'm actually running the company. So I can have input about what we're doing. But ultimately my clients that we hire, or that hire us rather, get the final say. I feel you need something on the side, right? So if you have this amazing passion for building things, there's no reason you shouldn't still be doing that while working a full-time job. Whether you have kids or anything else that's happening, you should have side projects to express that creative side of you. Now, if you end up in a large companies where you have to be, you almost end up just being like another cog in the machine. You're not really making that big of an impact. And some people love that. There's a lot of structure. You know exactly what needs to be done. But that wasn't for me. For me, I need to be making things that make a difference. I need to have input into them. So the second thing I would say is you need to determine what type of person that you are. You need to determine where you fit in the type of companies that could hire someone like you. Getting started though, you take whatever job you can get, to be honest with you, because as soon as you do that and you start getting real experience, you're going to be golden. I personally left a pretty high paying job to take a much lower paying job as a programming intern in the video game industry, and I learned so much more than college ever could have taught me. So if you can find those opportunities, jump into them, use them as a jumping point, but always be looking ahead to the next thing, right? Where you actually ultimately want to go. The third thing is you need to look at the actual finances around it. How old are you? How much money do you have to invest into college? What type of college do you want to go to? I've hired programmers that never went to college that self-taught themselves over a period of 10 years where they've worked at low-end jobs and worked their way up slowly, and they were leading multi-million-dollar projects. Unless you're working for a big company that says you have to have a master's degree or a bachelor's degree, skill is what ultimately matters. So I would say if you find yourself in a position where you don't have the money to go to college, or you're nervous about spending the money to go to college, do a bunch of side projects, do a bunch of stuff, find a part-time job, move into salary, and work your way up the chain. It's a little bit longer road because usually college degree is like an easier way into the door for some of the bigger companies, but you can make a living as a programmer without ever going to college, and I've seen it time and time again. I personally did go to college, but there are times when I was struggling and got behind on some of my student loan payments that, I was really, really debating on whether it was a good decision, because you come out of school and you're not going to make six figures. You're going to be lucky, depending on where you live, of course. In the area I'm in, you're lucky if you come out making $40,000 to $45,000 a year. In the game industry that I was a part of, I was making less than that. It took me a very long time to get to the point where I'm making a very comfortable amount of money now. But once you get there, you've worked your way up, you can start kind of formalizing your long-term plan and where you're going to go next. So my third thing is you need to choose what's best for you. So if you ultimately don't have the money to go to college, or if you want to be able to buy a house sooner, college debt puts a lot of stress on an individual. You need to decide if you're willing to accept that. And also when you're in college, live like you're in college, because you need to be saving every penny, working every minute that you possibly can. Heck, do some freelance work as a programmer, doing websites for people, or maybe you can find a local company like the one I have where you're working part-time, making something per hour, but yet building up your experience. There are ways to make it work, but ultimately you're going to leave college more than likely with $100,000 in debt today. You're going to have a bachelor's degree, and you're really not going to be prepared for the workforce unless you've put a lot of extra side work in. You need to know that. Leaving college with a degree is not enough to get you in the door to a guaranteed job. You need to be proactive. You need to be thinking long term. You need to constantly be learning. And college will give you the tools to do that. It's what you do with those tools that's the most important. So unfortunately, there's no exact answer to what the question is, because I do think there's a value in college education, but I also do think that you can succeed without a college education, specifically in computer science. Now, the 3 points, just to recap here, was the first point is you need to make sure that you love programming. You don't want to spend money on something that you may end up hating. The second thing is you need to determine what type of person you are. Because if you only like programming because you are a free spirit and you like making the decisions, you're only going to thrive in certain type of companies. And the third one is you need to look at your financial situation, where you are in your stage of life, how much support you have going into college, and make the decision. Because a lot of times going in, and I made this mistake myself, college, it looked like, oh, when I get out of college, everything's going to be answered. It was not. That was just the beginning of the journey, in my opinion. I came out and had to work very hard to be successful. So ultimately, that's my thoughts on whether you should go to college or not. And I would say don't forget, there's a lot of resources online. Please, please, please use them, because you could be such an amazing programmer while you're in high school, for that matter. And then you will know where you want to go in your career. So thanks a lot, guys. I hope this helps some of you guys out there. And until next time, peace out.